everyone. Okay, so far we've seen examples where you take in n as a parameter and we do recursion and, we did Fibonacci, factorial, one of those. Now I wanted to take a step back just so we can get a better understanding of recursion. And while this is not how you would typically implement, finding the sum of a list in Python, I thought, why don't I give you some examples where you see how we can pass a list as one of the parameters to a recursive function and what can we do with it. Okay, so this first example that I'm going to show you is how can you find the sum of integers of a list. Simple enough. Okay, you may want to think about it while I open up VS Code. Okay, so I hope you tried out how to find the sum of integers in a list. If you haven't, please pause it, try to write something, okay? Just start coding. All right, so think about the 5 steps that we've talked about for recursion. In this case, well, first we said we need to know what are the parameters, right? What are the parameters we're going to pass and compare for the base case and the recursive case? In this case, you kind of know I've already written what the parameter is. It's numbers. Now, numbers, you can say I use numbers. It's because it's not an integer, but I'm going to actually pass a list as a parameter, okay? So the parameter here is numbers, which is a list of numbers. What would be our base case? When would you return a sum of 0? That's your hint. Okay, so the base case is if the list is empty. If there are no numbers in the list, then you return 0. Now, what's our recursive case? What's the else? So of course, the check now, before we go to the recursive case, you know what the current value you're going to check against is. It's the length of the list, right? You're going to check the length of the list. If it is 0, like if there's no elements in the list, you return a sum of 0. What if there are elements in the list? Then how can you calculate it recursively? I know how you can do it with loops. I know you can just do it with the sum function, but I want you to think about how can you calculate that recursively, okay? In this case, what we're going to do is when we get a list, we're going to add the first integer of the list to the sum of all the other integers. Think about how you do addition. When you do addition, if I'm asking you to add 5 plus 6 plus 7, you invariably add 2 of those numbers. In this case, I'm telling you, why don't we add 6 and 7 first? So you add 6 plus 7, and then you add 5 to it. So if we add the sum of 6 and 7 to 5, we get the sum of all 3 numbers. So what this means for recursion is that we're adding, what are we adding? Numbers of 0. So the first element of the list, remember the indexing of a list starts at 0. So we're adding numbers of 0 to, we're going to call the getSum function on it, and we're going to call it on a part of the list. So which part of the list are you going to call it on? You're going to call it on the rest of the list, the one that doesn't include the first element. Did you get it? Okay, let's now try to write the code for this. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to check if there's no list, right? If it's 0, then we just return 0. And yeah, we can do an else or just without the else. Both are okay. What do we return? I said we return the first element, the sum of the first element added to, now we're going to call our getSum again, and we're going to call it on a list. But how do you get a list? We're not going to call it on the numbers list. We're going to call it on part of the numbers list. Which part of the numbers list? We're going to call it on, do you remember how to do range and how to find a part of the list? So we're going to start at the index 1 and return the rest of the list. So what we're doing in this case is we're calling the subfunction getSum on the rest of the list that doesn't include numbers of 0. Okay, does that make sense to you? So we have our base case, we have our recursive case, we have our if check, we know what the parameter that we're passing is, and we know what we're doing with the result. We're adding it. Okay, let's check it out. Let's call this function. I'm gonna say get sum, and let me call a list. 1, 2, 3, 4. And what's the answer? You should get 10. Let's see if we do get 10. Get 10. So we, of course, practiced using recursion. We used getSum to find the sum of a list, but you should know that there is an inbuilt function, right, called sum that is actually used to sum the elements of a list of numbers. And so you could simply use the sum function, and then it would return the same answer, which is 10. And you'll see that it returned 10. Okay. All right, I hope this was useful. If you have any questions, you can email me or you can maybe comment here and others can help you with it. Feel free to reach out to me and talk to you soon. Bye.